The war had been going on for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Decades of fighting had worn humanity thin, leaving entire colonies isolated and scarred. Ships floated through space like hollowed-out skeletons of what they once were, and people in command centers spoke in terms of statistics and losses rather than life and hope. The humans were strong, adaptable, and courageous, but the Vorak, an alien race known for their ruthless efficiency and unyielding strategy, had always been one step ahead. Every time humanity thought it had found an opening, the Vorak would close it, almost as if they could see the humans' thoughts before they happened. On Earth's main military command station, lights blinked in rapid succession as screens showed the positions of fleets, the trajectory of missiles, and the status of supply lines. Every officer present was tense, their faces drawn with exhaustion. This was supposed to be humanity's last chance to break the stalemate. If this mission failed, entire sectors would fall under Vorak control, and humanity would be forced into retreat, possibly losing its chance at survival altogether. Yet amidst this sea of seriousness, one man walked in whistling, a small, soft tune that seemed almost too cheerful for the tension-filled room. Captain Eli Mercer, known to everyone as Joke, for reasons that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with his uncanny knack for turning dangerous situations into slightly ridiculous spectacles, stood out like a bright star in a clouded sky. He wore the standard uniform, but it was slightly untucked, and one boot looked like it had been scuffed in a hurry. His hair was messy, his eyes bright, and there was a sense that nothing, not even the gravity of a looming interstellar war, could dampen his spirit. "Sir," said Lieutenant Renat Holt, one of the younger officers trying to hide a smile, "you do realize this mission is serious." He paused, glanced around, and added, "Though usually someone else takes the fall." Its defenses were legendary: impenetrable shields, advanced AI-driven weapons, and fleets of smaller attack ships that could swarm intruders in minutes. The Council needed someone to sneak in, gather intelligence, and if possible, disrupt the Vorak command structure. Most officers suggested using drones, automated ships, or a highly trained strike team. All of these suggestions were sound, logical, and boring. "Captain Mercer," said Admiral Keene, a tall, rigid man who had earned his rank through decades of service and precise decision-making. His voice carried authority, but there was a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "We have decided to assign you this mission." "Me," he said, trying to keep the surprise out of his voice, though the tone made it sound as if he had just been asked to fetch the coffee. "You're sending me in alone." This mission could get him killed. A controlled joke, if you will. Humans were messy, creative, and full of surprises. And Eli Mercer, despite his reputation, embodied all of that. The preparations began immediately. Eli was given a small, sleek stealth ship, barely larger than a fighter craft but equipped with enough tech to slip past Vorak sensors. It wasn't the most advanced craft available, but it was enough for someone who didn't plan to follow the standard procedures. He packed lightly: a few improvised tools, some basic weapons, a hacking interface, and of course his unshakable confidence. As he boarded the ship, technicians and fellow officers watched, some with worry, some with skepticism, and some with faint amusement. Eli waved cheerfully. "Don't worry about me. If I'm not back in one piece, blame the coffee," he joked, though his mind was already racing with ideas. Once in the cockpit, Eli ran through a mental checklist that wasn't in any manual. He considered every weakness the Vorak might have, not in terms of brute force, but in terms of predictability and protocol. The Vorak were precise, almost obsessively so. Humans, on the other hand, could think sideways, improvise, and turn mistakes into opportunities. That was his edge. The engines hummed to life, and with a soft jolt, Eli's ship launched from the command station. As he passed through the outer atmosphere, the enormity of the task ahead settled in. He was alone in hostile territory, tasked with undermining an enemy that had defeated countless others. Yet there was no fear in him, only excitement. His first step was to approach the Vorak outer perimeter. Sensors lit up on the ship's interface, showing a complex pattern of patrols and automated defense drones. Where others saw an impenetrable wall, Eli saw patterns, predictable rotations, and opportunities to slip through. He used small fragments of space debris as cover, hacking the Vorak's sensor signals to create false echoes. The Vorak, confident in their technology, hardly noticed the tiny human ship slipping past. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the ship and Eli's quiet mutterings to himself. He imagined the Vorak commanders sitting in their bright, sterile control rooms, sure that every human maneuver had been accounted for. Little did they know, one human had ignored the rules entirely, thinking instead like a creature that thrived on improvisation. Eventually, Eli reached the Vorak's communication relay hub. It was heavily guarded, with a dozen automated drones and reinforced shields. Most humans would have waited for reinforcements or attempted a complicated hack. Eli had another idea. He created a small, reflective decoy, sending it on a looping course that mimicked his ship's trajectory. The Vorak drones, seeing the decoy, diverted their attention. With the drones distracted, Eli slipped past the defenses, barely making a sound. It was almost laughably simple, yet required perfect timing and nerve. His pulse raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of turning theory into action. Inside the first layer of the command ship's defenses, Eli encountered an unexpected complication. A Vorak scientist had been left behind, tinkering with a weapon system. Eli quickly assessed the situation. The scientist was more afraid of him than dangerous. Speaking in calm, measured tones, he convinced the alien that cooperation was in its best interest. The alien, curious and cautious, agreed to help. This was humanity's unique strength, the ability to turn enemies into allies through ingenuity, empathy, and reasoning. Eli's new companion wasn't just a helper, it was proof that even the most disciplined and ruthless species could be influenced by simple logic and kindness. By the time Eli had moved deeper into the ship, night, or the alien equivalent of it, had fallen. Lights flickered, systems hummed, and shadows stretched long across metallic corridors. He moved quickly but cautiously, each step deliberate, each calculation made with the awareness that one wrong move could end everything. Yet, even in this tense environment, he found small moments of levity. A door that refused to open became a puzzle. A security drone that repeated its patrol pattern like clockwork became a game. Eli laughed quietly to himself, a sound that echoed strangely in the cold, alien corridors. As he reached the edge of the Vorak command deck, the enormity of the task became clear. Every officer on the Vorak ship was prepared for war, yet they were blind to one variable, a human who did not think like them. The mission that had been assigned as a joke was about to begin in earnest. Eli paused, placing a hand on the smooth metal of the corridor wall. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see if humans really can be ridiculous in all the right ways." For the first time in years, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Alone, underestimated, and ready to prove that humanity's cleverness was not something the Vorak, or anyone, could predict. The war was vast, terrifying, and brutal, but in the hands of one human, it had already begun to bend to logic and creativity. Eli Mercer, the man who had been sent as a joke, smiled. The real adventure was only just beginning, and somehow he knew it would be extraordinary. Eli Mercer moved through the corridors of the Vorak ship with quiet confidence. The metallic walls hummed with energy, the artificial lights flickered occasionally, and the faint scent of ionized air reminded him that this was enemy territory. Every step was careful but not fearful. He had a plan, or rather, a series of improvisations that would function as a plan. The Vorak, with all their advanced technology, operated like clockwork, predictable, logical, and that predictability was his advantage. He paused near a junction where multiple pathways branched. Sensors glowed faintly, and through the small displays he could see the patrol routes of the alien guards. Each Vorak moved in precise intervals, as if following a metronome. Eli smiled to himself. Humans never moved like that, and that difference was key. He whispered to the alien scientist following him, "Watch closely. This is human improvisation in action." He had been curious about Eli from the beginning, though he did not yet fully understand the human's thinking. "Your methods are unusual," Kyan said. "They are chaotic, inefficient. You make the system fight itself." Eli and Kyan slipped through, silent as shadows. Kyan's eyes widened. That was clever, very clever. Why do humans do such things?" Every doorway, every junction, every glowing panel was an opportunity to observe, to predict, to exploit. He noticed the Vorak were incredibly disciplined, but that discipline came at a cost: rigidity. They could not easily adapt to situations that broke their expected patterns. That rigidity would become a powerful tool. Eventually, they reached a junction leading to a storage bay filled with equipment and supplies. Eli paused, noticing a small cluster of drones guarding a shipment of advanced weapons. Normally, this would be a dangerous obstacle, but Eli saw another opportunity. He scanned the area and picked up a few loose cables and small power cells lying around. Within minutes, he had rigged a simple but effective diversion. A small spark here, a flicker of light there, and suddenly the drones swarmed toward the disturbance, leaving the shipment unguarded. Kyan shook his head in disbelief. Your solutions, they seem reckless, yet they succeed. Reckless is just a word for something the enemy doesn't expect. He paused and looked at the weapons shipment. Though I'm not touching these, not yet, they're too obvious. Eli observed quietly. He noticed that each officer relied heavily on routine signals and patterns, expecting every human maneuver to be logical. He grinned. Human logic rarely was. Using a combination of shadows, reflections, and small noises, Eli created the illusion of movement in one corridor while he and Kyan slipped through another. The Vorak officers, trained to respond to specific stimuli, followed the phantom signals, leaving the actual path clear. For the first time, Eli felt a thrill that went beyond danger. It was a pure game of wits, and humans, with all their unpredictability, had the advantage. After several hours, they reached the lower decks, where the Vorak stored sensitive information. Holographic screens floated in the air, displaying coordinates, battle plans, and schedules. Eli's mind raced as he scanned the data. This was valuable intelligence, enough to shift the balance of power if delivered to human command. Yet more importantly, he noticed weaknesses in the Vorak strategy. Their reliance on automated systems meant that one clever interference could cascade through their network, creating confusion far beyond what Eli had yet seen. He crouched beside a panel and began working with his tools. Tiny manipulators, code sequences, and improvisational hacking, all guided by instinct rather than protocol, allowed him to inject minor errors into the Vorak network. Nothing that would alert the aliens to sabotage immediately, but enough to create subtle disruptions, doors locking unexpectedly, communication loops, and sensor misreads. Each small interference was a ripple in a pond, destined to grow larger. Kyan watched silently. You manipulate systems with art, he said. Your methods are illogical to me, yet they function perfectly. The corridors grew wider, and the hum of machinery was replaced by the steady rhythm of Vorak operations. Guards were more vigilant, and security systems were far more advanced. Yet Eli's confidence never wavered. Each challenge was a puzzle, and humans excelled at puzzles when no one expected them to. Eli paused before a reinforced door leading to the Vorak command core. This was the heart of the ship, the source of all decision-making. It was protected by advanced locks, automated turrets, and multiple layers of surveillance. Most humans would have waited for a strike team, but Eli had never been most humans. He studied the security system carefully, noting its patterns and timing. He whispered to Kyan, "Watch this." "Timing is everything." "You are remarkable," he said softly. Inside the command core, Eli found himself surrounded by alien officers at holographic consoles. The Vorak seemed confident that no human could penetrate this far, that their systems were impenetrable. Yet here he was, a single human, moving with a mixture of daring, observation, and creativity that no protocol could anticipate. Eli carefully studied the consoles, noting the flow of information. He realized that by creating false inputs and simulated emergencies, he could make the Vorak officers act against each other. He tapped into one of the terminals, sending subtle miscommunications across their network. A message indicating a phantom fleet approaching one sector caused a junior officer to panic, sending orders that contradicted the rest of the command. Within minutes, the core was a flurry of confusion, not yet chaos, but enough for Eli to manipulate the situation further. Kyan's eyes widened. This is more than clever. You are turning them against themselves. Humans don't always fight with the strongest weapons. Sometimes we win by being smarter, faster, and a little unexpected. The dominoes were falling, and he had only nudged the first few. He glanced at Kyan. "You'll see something amazing soon," he said. "The Vorak are good, but they're predictable. Mess with the rules and watch the magic happen." Every movement Eli made, every misdirection he employed, created small victories that stacked on each other. Doors locked where they shouldn't, alarms sounded without reason, and the officers scrambled to interpret the chaos. All of it was subtle enough not to trigger an immediate alert, but powerful enough to create doubt and hesitation. Eli paused for a moment to catch his breath, leaning against a console. "You know," he said, smiling, "sometimes I forget that this is war. It feels more like a game of chess, except the pieces are panicking before you even move them." Humans have always had a knack for turning the impossible into the possible. That's why we survive, and sometimes why we win. He studied the layout carefully, noting weak points and timing windows. He would need precision, patience, and a little improvisation to succeed. Yet even as he prepared, he felt no fear. Humans had faced extinction countless times, and they had always found a way. In the quiet of the Vorak ship, amidst the glowing consoles and the faint hum of energy, Eli felt a profound certainty. Humanity's unpredictability, its creativity, and its stubbornness were weapons no alien could fully anticipate. And with that thought, Eli Mercer took his first deliberate steps toward the heart of the Vorak command ship, a single human armed not with overwhelming firepower, but with wit, courage, and the irrepressible spirit that made humans unstoppable. Eli Mercer crouched behind a cluster of holographic consoles, watching the Vorak officers scramble across the command core. Each flicker of their movements, each confused order only confirmed what he already knew. Humans were unpredictable, and the Vorak could not comprehend the creativity that thrived in the chaos. This was not brute force. It was ingenuity, strategy born of instinct and observation. He glanced at Kyan, who was quietly assisting, feeding minor adjustments into the systems while avoiding suspicion. The alien scientist's eyes widened as he observed Eli's method. "You manipulate their entire fleet without a single shot fired," Kyan whispered. "It is unbelievable." "We prove it doesn't." He needed only small nudges to create ripples that would escalate into massive confusion. With a few precise commands, Eli sent a series of false signals through the communication network. A phantom fleet was approaching from an unexpected sector, and the Vorak officers reacted immediately. Orders were sent to redirect ships, weapons were recalibrated, and entire patrols shifted positions. Within minutes, the command core was in turmoil. Officers argued over conflicting instructions, questioning each other's decisions, and the AI systems struggled to reconcile the discrepancies. Kyan watched in awe. It is as if the entire command is collapsing from within. Chaos is the ultimate weapon. The more they try to control it, the worse it gets. Using the same improvisational methods that had served him earlier, he created a series of holographic projections that mimicked additional personnel moving through the corridors. The drones, perceiving multiple targets, began chasing phantoms, their sensors overwhelmed and confused. "Sometimes you don't need to fight," Eli said with a quiet laugh. "You just need to be clever enough to make your enemy fight themselves." Officers ran from terminal to terminal, trying to restore order, while the AI systems worked tirelessly to resolve what it perceived as multiple simultaneous crises. All the while, Eli and Kyan moved silently through the chaos, inching closer to the central control console that governed the entire fleet. Eli paused, observing a senior Vorak commander barking orders in frustration. The aliens' movements were precise but desperate, every action dictated by protocol and habit. Eli recognized a pattern. The Vorak relied on predictability, and humans could exploit that. He smiled to himself. By subtly contradicting the expected responses, he could force the Vorak into decisions that would weaken their entire strategy. He tapped into the central console and accessed a section controlling fleet coordination. By creating a phantom signal indicating that certain ships had been destroyed or incapacitated, he forced the Vorak commanders to overcompensate. Orders were sent to sectors that did not need reinforcement, while actual critical points were left unprotected. Within a short time, the Vorak fleet was scattered and vulnerable, all without Eli having to engage in direct combat. Kyan's voice was filled with wonder. "You are doing what no Vorak could anticipate. It is genius. And when you let someone think they understand your moves, that's when you win." But if he acted with precision, he could turn the detection into another opportunity. He smiled, quickly inputting a series of commands. The system glitches escalated, spreading the anomalies across multiple terminals. By the time the Vorak officers realized the issue, it was too late. They were reacting to problems that did not exist, chasing phantom fleets and arguing over false intelligence. The detection became another layer of chaos, amplifying the effects of Eli's manipulations. "See," Eli whispered to Kyan, "even when they notice, it only helps us." Access here was heavily restricted, but Eli's previous work had created enough distractions that security was thin. He bypassed the final locks with a combination of hacking, improvisation, and a little luck, stepping into the heart of the command system. From this vantage point, Eli could see the entire Vorak operation laid bare. Ships were misaligned, weapons were misfired, and fleets moved counterintuitively. He realized that with a few additional manipulations, he could force the Vorak to retreat entirely, effectively ending the threat without a single battle being fought. Kyan watched, his eyes wide with amazement. You could end the war from here. We don't need to destroy their fleet. We just need to make them destroy themselves. Their rigid discipline, which had always been their strength, became their weakness. Each attempted correction only deepened the confusion, and soon the entire fleet was in disarray. Eli smiled faintly. This was the moment humans excelled at, improvisation under pressure. Where the Vorak saw rules, humans saw opportunities. Where the Vorak saw order, humans created chaos that could be navigated with intelligence and wit. He had turned the enemy's strength into a vulnerability. Hours passed as Eli maintained control over the subtle disruptions. The Vorak fleet continued to scatter, retreat, and misfire. Each action he initiated caused a chain reaction, weakening the enemy without a single human ship engaging in combat. Eli leaned back slightly, feeling the satisfaction that only comes from success achieved through cleverness rather than brute force. Finally, the Vorak command ship fell silent, its officers immobilized by the confusion Eli had created. Ships abandoned their positions, retreating to avoid phantom threats. Communications failed as the AI systems struggled to reconcile conflicting orders. The human fleets, monitoring from a distance, saw the opportunity and began coordinated strikes against scattered Vorak forces, meeting little resistance. Eli looked at Kyan, who had been observing every step. Sometimes, Eli said, the smartest battle is the one you don't fight directly. Humans don't always need to blast through walls. Sometimes all it takes is a little imagination. That's the thing about humans, we're full of surprises. You might have power, technology, and discipline, but we have cunning, adaptability, and the ability to think sideways. That's why we survive. That's why we win. He sent small adjustments, nudges that amplified confusion, ensuring the Vorak could not regain control. Every officer, every ship, every weapon system remained trapped in a dance they could not comprehend, orchestrated by one human who refused to be bound by their logic. Eventually, Eli began to pull back. The worst of the disruption had been achieved, and the human fleets were already exploiting the openings he had created. He sent a final series of commands that mimicked a full-scale human assault, forcing the remaining Vorak ships to retreat entirely. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized, and the command ship itself was incapacitated, not destroyed, but rendered useless. Kyan looked at him, astonishment and admiration mingling in his expression. You have done what no Vorak could even imagine. You have ended the threat without combat, without bloodshed. Sometimes we win before the battle even begins. Humanity had gained the upper hand without firing a single shot. As they made their way back toward the ship's exit, Eli allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He had accomplished the impossible not through brute force, but through cleverness, patience, and the human ability to improvise. Kyan followed silently, now fully convinced of the human capacity for ingenuity and unpredictability. Eli whispered to himself almost jokingly, humans, turning jokes into victories since the beginning of time. The Vorak, powerful and efficient as they were, had been undone by a single human mind, a mind willing to break rules, think differently, and exploit every advantage the enemy did not even know existed. The mission was far from over. Eli still had to return, and the Vorak were not entirely defeated. But the first decisive blow had been struck, and it had been done in a way that only humans could achieve, through creativity, courage, and unpredictability. Eli Mercer's small ship glided silently through the Vorak fleet, now scattered and confused after the chaos he had created within their command ship. From his vantage point, the once imposing alien armada seemed disorganized, drifting like a school of fish without a leader. Systems misfired, weapons aimed incorrectly, and ships changed course erratically. The Vorak, who had been feared across the galaxy, were now vulnerable in ways no human had ever witnessed. Kyan, still perched beside him in the cockpit, could not hide his astonishment. It is incredible. You have turned an entire fleet into chaos with a single mind, one human mind. Every one of them is trying to outthink a problem they cannot even see. That's when humans have the edge. Without needing to fire a shot, Eli could direct the remaining Vorak ships into positions that allowed for strategic advantages. He sent a series of encoded signals to human command. Using subtle cues and minor manipulations, he guided the fleet to intercept the retreating ships in safe, controlled ways. Humans moved carefully, taking advantage of openings created purely by the Vorak's inability to adapt. Eli and Kyan navigated their way closer to the outer edge of the Vorak fleet. The alien ships were panicked, firing randomly at empty space, recalibrating sensors to targets that did not exist. Every move the Vorak made played into Eli's hands. He whispered to Kyan, "Humans rarely win by brute force. Most of the time, we win because our enemies underestimate what we can do. They cannot predict us." Using minor signals, small energy pulses, and electronic distractions, he caused the ships to misalign further. One by one, the vessels drifted away from formation, essentially immobilized. Eli smiled. "They think they are following orders. They are actually falling apart." Without heavy combat, humans could reclaim territory that had been under Vorak control for decades. Colonies that had feared the alien threat for years now had a moment to breathe. Humanity was finally seizing the advantage, not through overwhelming firepower, but through wit, coordination, and the ability to act unpredictably. Eli's mind, always moving faster than the situation around him, considered the larger implications. By the time the Vorak realized the scale of the disruption, human forces would have secured key sectors, gaining both strategic and psychological victories. The war, which had dragged on for decades, was now tipping in humanity's favor because one human had dared to act differently. "Captain," Kyan said quietly, pointing to a Vorak ship struggling to maintain orbit around the moon, "that ship is completely exposed. You could disable it if you wanted." Chaos can do more than weapons ever could. He activated another sequence of subtle signals, nudging the remaining ships into even more disorder. "See, they're scattering. They're chasing shadows, not humans." Their fleet was fragmented, their systems were failing, and morale was collapsing. Each attempted correction only made the situation worse. They had never encountered humans like Eli, unpredictable, clever, and able to turn their greatest strengths into weaknesses. Eli watched carefully as ships aimed at each other mistakenly, sensors overloaded, and communications broke down. "Humans win because we refuse to play by their rules," he said. "The Vorak are strong, yes, but they are not adaptable enough to deal with creativity. Outsmarting is harder and much more fun." The remaining Vorak ships, believing themselves surrounded, began retreating toward their home territories. Eli monitored their movements, ensuring that no human lives were unnecessarily endangered. He directed small fleets to intercept isolated Vorak ships, which surrendered or fled without resistance. This strategy not only minimized casualties, but maximized the psychological impact on the enemy. Humans were proving that intelligence and adaptability could outmatch brute force. Hours passed as Eli guided the operation. The scattered Vorak fleet continued to retreat, disorganized and demoralized. Each human decision was precise, deliberate, and effective. Eli remained calm, almost serene, as he adjusted minor details that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. Finally, the Vorak began to realize the extent of the failure. Orders went unheeded, ships drifted aimlessly, and officers argued endlessly over conflicting instructions. The Vorak, who had once struck fear into every human heart, were now fleeing in confusion, unable to coordinate even a simple defense. Eli allowed himself a small smile. "Humans win because we are unpredictable, clever, and adaptable. That's all it takes. Entire fleets are retreating, and you have done it without a single weapon fired." The Vorak were still retreating, but their ability to regroup had been severely compromised. Colonies that had once been on the brink of invasion were now secure, and humans had gained the upper hand in a war that had seemed endless. Eli took a moment to reflect. The mission had begun as a joke, a test no one expected him to succeed in. And yet, through improvisation, intelligence, and a willingness to act unpredictably, humanity had achieved a decisive advantage. One man, underestimated and underestimated again, had shifted the balance of power. Kyan, still silent, finally spoke. "You have done something no one believed possible. Humans are remarkable." "We've always been remarkable. People just forget that when things get tough. I didn't do anything special. I just acted like a human, thought like a human, and used what makes us us." The Vorak fleet had been neutralized strategically, and their ability to strike human colonies had been eliminated. Every human ship they passed greeted them with signals of acknowledgement and relief. By the time Eli approached the main command station, news of the Vorak's retreat had already begun to spread. Officers and commanders watched in disbelief as reports indicated that the enemy fleet was in disarray. Some whispered that it was luck, others that it was a miracle. Eli, quietly docking his ship, knew better. It was human ingenuity, cleverness, and the willingness to act unconventionally that had won the day. As he stepped from his ship, the command station erupted with cautious celebration. People clapped, cheered, and hugged, though many still struggled to believe what had happened. Eli walked through the crowd with his usual casual grin, ignoring the accolades for the moment. There was still work to be done, and he knew the war was not yet fully over. But for the first time in decades, humanity had hope. One man, underestimated and dismissed as a joke, had caused the Vorak to retreat before any significant battle could even take place. The balance of power had shifted, and the ingenuity of a single human mind had reminded everyone of what made humanity extraordinary. Eli finally paused in the command center, looking out over the stars. The Vorak fleet was scattered, human colonies were safe for the moment, and the future, though uncertain, was brighter than it had been in years. Kyan stood beside him, still processing the events that had unfolded. "You did this," Kyan said softly. "You single-handedly created an advantage humans could not have achieved through force alone. Humans don't always need to fight with weapons. Sometimes we fight with ideas, creativity, and a little courage. That's our strength." The Vorak, once feared across the stars, had been humbled by a single human mind acting unpredictably, decisively, and cleverly. Eli Mercer, the man sent in as a joke, had shown that the strength of humanity was not only in firepower or numbers. It was in creativity, adaptability, and the courage to act when no one else believed it could succeed. The stars outside the command center sparkled, silent witnesses to humanity's ingenuity. And Eli, smiling faintly to himself, knew that the war was only beginning, but for the first time, humans were leading the way.